Good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here again in the second day of the African Art in Venice Forum. We're really pleased to introduce you to this inspiring panel. For us, it's one of those panels that relate to our main focus this year, like intra-African cultural cooperation. And we have here like the representatives of artist-led initiatives that can actually bring that kind of cooperation in place on a private level, on a semi-public level. But what we aim is like to highlight those experiences of cooperation between different countries. And here, I think you will find good examples and good potential, definitely. But I'll let Heba Elkayal to introduce the panelists.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at 10 a.m. It's a pretty early start to Venice morning. Thank you so much to the panelists who are going to be speaking with me today, and I'm very excited to be engaging in a conversation with everyone about coming closer together, building art alliances across Africa. The initial idea behind this panel, as I was in conversation with Neri and Alex, is that there are a lot of conversations that are being had independently in different enclaves, in different circles, and the real effort and the success in the long run, I think, is that we have these dialogues and engage together across institutions, across countries, and across borders. The reason being, I think, is because we have so much to gain from one another, and we have so much to exchange, and we have so many commonalities. Yesterday in conversation with somebody, I said, we'll be having a panel about Africa, and his response was, well, is Egypt in Africa? Can it be considered African? And I said, it is African, very much so. And I think this is just one of the problems and examples we have about how we really need to reconsider and reframe our understanding of Africa and the multiplicity within Africa. But when it comes to building alliances and building connections and bridges, there's so much potential for what that could bring about for the art world and the art ecosystem at large. And so I'd like to ask each person here to present themselves and to speak to us about their foundation. Karen?
How many minutes do we have?
I leave that to you.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Karen Monica Reini, and I am head curator at the Lusaka Contemporary Art Center, which is an art center that is actually being built as we speak. Our founder, Victor Mutelekesha, is a Zambian-Norwegian artist. I'm a Zambian-Norwegian myself. And on private initiative, has decided that we needed this artist-run space in the capital of Zambia. So we're opening in January 2023, and I'll be glad to see, hopefully some of you there, if possible.
Belinda.
So my name is Belinda Holden, and I'm the director of the Yinka Shonibare Foundation. We're based in London, and we have our sister organisation, which is Guest Artist Space Foundation in Nigeria. And we have our space opening this month. So we welcome our first residents at the beginning of May. So we have this amazing artist space in Lagos, and we have, again, an artist and research space in Ijebu Ode, which is an environmental farm, eco-farm that Yinka has set up about 2 years ago. And we've just finished building the artist space and first workshops. And again, that is around sort of sustainability, food security, and artists and researchers coming together.
Hello, my name is Roger Ballen. I built and started the Inside Out Center for the Arts in Johannesburg, South Africa. We're almost, sounds like everybody is in the same time zone. We're about to open our first exhibition in a few months. The purpose of the foundation and the center is to make art that has a psychological impact, is relevant to Africa, has something to do with Roger Ballen, young Roger Ballen's aesthetic, and is, I guess, will spark interest in the local community through seeing art and the other programs that the center is going to organize in the future. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Moataz Nasr. I'm an artist, and I'm also the founder of Darb 1718, which is a culture center in Cairo. We started in 2008, and we're still trying to keep on going, although it's becoming like more complicated now. And we are working in different fields, whether with the society or with all kind of art. Culture for us is a mission, and we are trying to be always in communication with the street and the people. And we started a residency lately, and we maybe one day we can collaborate and we can have you there. Thank you.
Introducing, hi Ibrahim. It's nice to.
Hello. Hi.
I'm glad you could join us on this morning. Could you please introduce yourself and the work that you've been doing to our audience?
Thank you very much. My name is Ibrahim Mahama. I work from Ghana, Tamale specifically. I established these three art institutions here over the last couple of years, one of which is SCCA Tamale, that's the Savannah Center for Contemporary Arts. Originally established just to be an artist studio, but later on we realized that we needed more cultural institutions within the country and the city. So the idea to open it up for retrospectives and exhibitions, and subsequently Red Clay, and then Nkrumah Volne, which is this old abandoned silo, which I bought from the city, and then we repurposed into a contemporary arts institution. So the idea basically has been to build different types of institutions that present art again, transforms art from the state of a commodity into a gift to a different generation. That's it.
Thank you. Seeing as some of the institutions represented here today have just started or in the process of opening, I'd like to start off with Moataz, so maybe he could share with us some of the experiences he's had with Darb 1718 and how building an institution, the challenges of that, and sort of what results you've seen, what quantifiable results you've seen with artists. Oh, okay. Okay. My question to Moataz right now was asking him about Darb 1718 having been established for a few years and what impact it's had on artists in Egypt.
Do you have time? Well, it's actually it was so complicated. As I said, we opened in 2008, but we did an opening before in 2007, and then we got closed because the government at that time didn't understand how come a person can start a culture center. It's the governmental rule, yeah. So how come someone can do that? So anyway, it took me a year, and I faced a lot of problems for a year, and we started again in 2008. At the beginning, things were going smoothly, easily, until the complications that happened throughout the 2011, the revolution, and what happened after that, from 2011 to 2013. And then after that, lately, we start to have, they start to concentrate more into what we're doing, since they start to see how art has a strong impact on the culture and on the people. So there was a lot of involvement of the national security and what to show and what not to show. Censorship has becoming really very strong. I mean, I'm trying to make it so short. Maybe it sounds very simple, but actually we've been going through a lot. It's very difficult to raise money, very hard to work away from the government. You have to be part of it, or you'll be always facing a lot of issues. And I was insisting from the very beginning to be independent, and we will continue independent. Most of the culture centers in Cairo that started by individuals were closed totally. We are the only one remain now. I'm not saying that to say that I'm proud of that, but I'm just saying that it's a pity that because definitely the others was also giving us power, and we're working together and we're supporting each other. So, and I don't know for how long this can last, but well. Yeah.
What motivates you to keep going, Moataz?
When I see, the most important thing is when I see young artists growing and making something for example, when one of the artists that start working was Darb, her first time, her name is Amina. She got the prize in the Bamako Biennale. I felt that I took this prize. I mean, she started. At the beginning she was working with us as a volunteer, young artist before she graduated, and then slowly she started going on and so on. And there's many like this. I think this kind of example that keep you going makes you feel that you should keep on going, although it's the complications of whether financial or political or security. Well, the 14 years were enough for us to learn about how we can push the borders and slowly the red lines, I mean, to see how far we can go. So like we're trying to gain a little bit of piece of land every time with every exhibition we're doing. But it's very critical. It's like playing chess. You have to be very careful with every move you do. So it's very complicated, especially that, okay, I'm at the end, I'm just an artist, you know. I'm not really like, maybe I have a vision, I have a dream, I want to do something to my country because I was lucky and I went internationally and I was like showing everywhere, and I want everybody to have the same chance. But it definitely it's not an easy target, but we are trying, and I think we did a lot of good things. We worked with more than 1,200 artists. I mean, we had more than 500 exhibitions throughout the 14 years. Sometimes we're having a show every month because we're trying to push more to keep the energy going on. And even when they stopped, for example, the Cairo Biennale stopped in 2010, and it was one of the most important contemporary art events in Egypt. And they stopped it for security, money, financial reasons, whatever they were saying. But anyway, we started something called Something Else. It's called Something Else, and it was like the off Biennale for the Biennale that doesn't exist in 2015, and then we redo it again in 2018. And that actually encouraged them to come back to do the Cairo Biennale again in 2019, but it was really a real mass, and they stopped again. It was just like, so this was good to see that actually our action managed to
prompt a reaction.
Exactly.
And prompt a reaction from the government,
exactly,
the cultural entity, to start providing cultural activities and events.
Yes, exactly. And now, well, we'll see about what's going to happen after that.
Thank you, Moataz.
Pleasure.
Ibrahim, could you please tell us about how, since establishing your foundation, what impact it's had, and how you faced challenges that have come your way, and what the biggest challenges have been so far?
Thank you very much. Yeah, challenges. That's interesting because for me, the challenge was even to think about the idea of establishing the institution in the first place. In 2014, when I started working internationally and gaining capital from my work, because for a long time the idea was that artists were meant to be artists to make or produce their objects for exhibitions, be it international exhibitions, and then the establishment of cultural institutions maybe will be left to the states or other bodies. But over the decades, of course, we've seen the inabilities of the states to establish these cultural institutions, even with the ones that were established back in the post-independence period, which were totally neglected. I think there is this constant focus on profit making. Like if you establish a cultural institution, how does it become part of like the bodies of, let's say, tourist organizations, like touristic organizations and all that? And I always thought that arts and its experiences were far beyond that. So the challenge in the beginning was how to create an institution that could shift that, how to create an institution that could somehow use the failures and crises that we were coming from as a starting point to create, let's say, a new institution that rather becomes a gift to like the society. So we had to do that by looking at like old infrastructure that existed before that would have been abandoned and trying to resurrect or bring it back to life, or doing exhibitions within that, or building studios that could act more than just artist studios for producing artworks, but studios that could become much larger entities for extending pedagogical forms and all that. So that's how come Red Clay it particularly came into being. The idea that we could almost assemble different failures in the forms of archives, material forms and all that in order to establish an institution that could allow for people to think more freely. And we focus a lot of our programs on workshops and education, because aside trying to push the freedoms within the idea of establishing a cultural institution, one of the most important things was to develop a program that could even extend to, let's say, rural communities, because where the institution is in some of the poorest parts of the country. So I thought that by building the space, let's say, for instance, not in the capital city where all the capital and the so-called intellectuals or elites are staying, by establishing it, let's say, in a rural community, that's not even good enough. There has to be a program that is established that can somehow extend into even the communities much more. So sometimes every day we have a bus that goes to like rural communities that brings at least 50 students to see all the three institutions. In so doing, we also try to remap the city in terms of their histories and knowledge of it. It's been important because now you have parents who are doctors or engineers who are beginning to see that maybe arts, the idea of arts which they knew it to be is not exactly what it is. So sometimes you have parents who bring their children to the institution saying that, oh, my child is good in drawing, I heard you speak on TV or radio, and I think that maybe you might mentor him or give him words of encouragement. Before, it wouldn't happen. Probably we were lucky that we had, coming from the art school in Kumasi, we had professors like Caricature, Castro and others who actually dedicated their practice to somehow rethinking about how artists could be a lot more radical and open up cultural experiences within the place that we're coming from. So for me, I think that even the absence of the states, for me, it's even an excitement, because a lot of the people who are managers within that field don't really, in my opinion, understand the significance of, let's say, building these types of institutions. So if we as actors within this field can take on the responsibility to be able to do this, no matter what it takes, even if we fail in the process of doing it, at least we would have proven that it was possible and there's a different way of doing things. There's an alternative, rather than focusing on the states and its apparatus, and then it will lead us back to the chaos and catastrophe that we came from.
Thank you for that, Ibrahim. Roger, if I may ask, could you talk to us a bit about the building, because it's a very particular building. Could you tell us about the space and sort of what you're aspiring to create?
Yes. Well, I started the building in January 2019, and the idea for the space was that it should be built out of elemental materials, namely concrete. I like the idea of concrete because it feels like a earthy material, and second, as a photographer, the tone of the concrete, the middle gray, is the ideal background, at least over the years, for most black and white photographers. So I've always liked the color, and I've always liked the marks that come from building the concrete. It feels organic. So I wanted the building initially to have something organic about it. So that was the idea in the beginning. And then I worked with an architect. Initially, the idea was that the museum should be a photo museum, because I've been a photographer for over 50 years, and I thought that would be the way to go. And as the building went up and up and up, I could see that photography had to be somewhat secondary, or at least on a parallel to other art forms, because the walls were very high. The walls were high, and it was very difficult to put a small photograph on a high wall. So as time went on, I said to myself, now we have to change the name from, initially it was Roger Ballen Foundation for Photography, then it became Foundation for Contemporary Art, but that was a bit boring too, so that didn't really say anything. There's a billion contemporary art museums. It's like a word, like calling something water here. You're never going to remember it. It's all the same. Anyway, so I had to think quite deeply, and sometimes nothing comes of that. Sometimes when you think you're going to be thinking deeply, nothing comes out, and it just comes from nowhere. So anyway, the word Inside Out Center for the Arts all of a sudden came from somewhere. So that was basically, I guess, my modus operandi for most of my life in the arts. It was trying to make a psychological message from somewhere in here to somewhere out there. And when the viewer sees the art, they see something out here and it ends up here, not here, here. That's the place you have to get to. Here, everybody knows what it's about. This is what everybody knows. You got to get into the primal mind. So that's really been the purpose, it will be the purpose of the exhibitions here, to make an impact on the subconscious mind. So people, when they see the place, somehow or another it sticks there. It's not as easy as a formulation to do this. There's no formulation for doing this, but it's the goal to make a more of a primal impact rather than telling people what they know already. You know, you have to remember something. People are reading all the time about the same thing over and over again. As an artist, it's a bit boring, and it's not going to get you anywhere in some ways by telling everybody what they see on CNN or they read in the paper all day and night. You have to find another place. So that's the goal of the Inside Out Center, to make exhibitions, to give talks, to have students come there and try to penetrate the frontal part of the head to the back part of the head. And I'm hopeful that the exhibitions and the talks and the events that we create in the museum are going to do that. That's my goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Karen, can you talk to us, please, about some of the programming that you've been working on so far, and what's sort of come together, and what the aspirations are moving forward?
Well, we can start with aspirations because, as mentioned in the introduction, the Lusaka Contemporary Art Center is the vision of an artist, Victor Mutelekesha, and as I have to give a bit of a background, because he was one of the artists that through a Norwegian development fund got a scholarship to Norway, and several Zambian artists did the same, and he felt the need to go back and create more spaces that would give people that opportunity. So this is literally Victor about 10 years ago finding a piece of land and throwing all his private initiative into this. So as you can see, it's still in construction, and the center is essentially split into 3 entities, and it's residency spaces, a gallery space at the back, in addition to a space for talks and the research library. And the aspirations are essentially to create a space primarily for artists to sort of congregate, because that's what he felt was lacking. There is no art academy in Zambia. There is no sort of formal institution. We have a college that offers some degree of education in that line, but there wasn't any space to sort of engage together and congregate outside of those small ones. So his idea was, why not create that? So the aspiration is literally bring them together, and after bringing them together, because it's not a massive space, we're also able to offer talks for those that are interested, present the works of these artists, but also because several of us, I mean, we're based in Norway, a lot of us, being able to sort of exchange ideas from there. It seems like a very absurd connection, Norway and Zambia, but there's a very long-running history, and it's received a lot of development aid over the years, resulting in these sort of connections of people. So a meeting space is essentially the aspiration. And the programming will primarily be based around the residencies. So the idea is to always have a local in a wider sense, so that would be the region. So we're in Zambia, that could be neighboring countries, Malawi, Botswana, Zimbabwe, etc. And then possibly then having a more international residence. And always having an exhibition, sort of a core exhibition that they then engage with, and that we shift according to the productions of these residencies. So that's the initial ideas. We have many grand ideas as well as how to gradually bring like classes and into the space, but let's see how we manage the first round.
Have there been any challenges so far?
Oh, one thing is the distance. Of course, when you have both the founder and your head curator sitting in Oslo and a building in Lusaka, even though we're there all the time, the challenge is more logistical. We're both very privileged in the sense that we're able to, first of all, this is privately financed. There has been no support from the local government. We've had a change recently of the government, which is seems to be a lot more interested in the arts. But as Ibrahim pointed out, it's, you know, we have a Ministry of Arts and Tourism, and it's actually tourism and arts. We have, you know, big waterfalls, Victoria Falls, and everything is tied up to the tourism sector. So if we're not catering to tourists, we're not very interesting to the Ministry of Arts and Tourism. So the idea is to basically just keep ourselves completely independent. The current government, which came in last year, is quite open-minded, so they just let people do their things. But there is no support there. So the challenge is primarily receiving support. But there, the Norwegian entities, when we have, say, Zambian Norwegian artists, they're willing to sponsor that exchange. So that has been helpful for financing the inaugural exhibition, as well as other activities. But I suppose the main challenge is getting interest, cultivating interest, because the culture in Zambia there's an idea of our local culture, which is part of our everyday life, our dances, ceremonies, language, wedding, etc. And then contemporary art is something removed from it. So trying to understand, or trying to spread the idea that those things actually have a middle ground and they can engage. So I suppose those are the challenges.
Is contemporary art seen as something that is not part or cannot fit into the local culture or into local communities? Is that one of the challenges?
I think for the average Zambian, it's seen as removed from their everyday life. If you bring contemporary art, that's something very Western. But the idea of art, or that modern in the sense of being made today, like contemporary, that's not removed. But when it's framed in the white cube, then it's considered sort of something outside. But that's why several spaces, artist-run spaces, are breaking down that idea that it's something else. Anything that's made by you, that creative input and expression, is contemporary art. It's made now.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there is a very sort of colonial disconnect between what happens in a museum and what happens in everyday life and culture.
Thank you. Belinda, the Yinka Shonibare Foundation has yet to start, and you were explaining to me that COVID had an impact on the start date, but you've been able to pivot. Could you tell us about the foundation, the aspirations, and how you've managed to sort of problem solve in the wake of COVID?
Yes, yeah, I think, it's a universal, isn't it? We've all had to sort of think around different ways of working. I mean, luckily for us, Yinka, from his studio in London for about 12 years now, has run a project space on the ground floor called Guest Projects. And that has been the founding inspiration to sort of take this kind of project space and have that facility in Lagos and also in the rural area of Ijebu. So we've had, hundreds of artists, scientists, collaborate. It's a very multidisciplinary space, and I think that's very important, has been very important for Yinka over the years. He has a very multidisciplinary practice himself. And this idea of cultural exchange between creatives, practitioners, researchers, scientists is really important. And also that grounding within the local community. So something that, as part of Guest Projects, we always ask those who come and have the project space, how are you interacting with your local peers? Or communities or education. What is it you're going to do? And that's part of the pitch for the space. And that is something we're going on to do. So during COVID, we had a building coming out of the ground, well, two buildings coming out of the ground, one in Lagos and one on the farm that Yinka had started a couple of years ago. Which is an environmental, if you like, a model farm. It's there for learning. It's there to look at sustainable farming, small-scale farming methods that are part of a circular economy, and it's about food security for the locality. And it's already had a fantastic impact, and it's self-sustaining already. So already the crops that are growing sustains. The farm workers, sustains the investment going forward. And obviously, again, it's a private initiative. Yinka has put his own sort of money into these buildings, the land, getting everything set up. And if you like, then my responsibility now that Yinka has charged me with making it sustainable to encourage and enable artists to come free of charge to be inspired and use this space. And obviously not just artists, architects, designers, makers, researchers, scientists, agriculturalists, to come and create together. So during COVID, we decided to, let's do digital residencies. How can we still enable people to create work, think about work, negotiate, liaise, come together, mentor, partner. So I did what I had to do in terms of fundraising. So that's my big thing is fundraising. How can we make this sort of a long-term sustainable part of Yinka's legacy? So we, as a registered charity, were able to access funds that many artists couldn't. In the UK, the Arts Council suddenly sort of stopped all their funding rounds, and it was catastrophic for all of those artists who were in the process of developing work, were relying on just small grants, but for them was catastrophic, particularly for 2020. So we were able to very quickly sort of establish some funding and make sure we could give those grants to the people we'd already guaranteed the project space. So we already had offered them the project space. And we asked them, how could you conceive of your project in a very different way and yet still allow people to sort of see your work, see your process, share in that journey of working. And I suppose for us, we don't have an exhibition space as such in any of our buildings. We do talk about them as project spaces in relation to the live-work space. So actually what you can see here is the space in Ijebu. And these bricks were basically 40,000 bricks from the earth around the farm. Cast, and I think it was really important all along that we're working with local artisans, local architects, local makers in everything we're doing and producing, and creating very low carbon sustainable buildings. So it's just a beautiful place. Sorry, I've kind of gone off track.
No, you haven't. Not at all. I think one of the things that we talk about the challenges of building institutions, but the other challenge that one has to bear in mind is keeping them going, because they really start to have impact in 5 years, 10 years time. And I'm sure that's something that's on everyone's mind, how to keep the efforts and the work going. Moataz, you spoke about the challenges that you face from the government, challenges that you face from obstacles, grants, funding. These are all very significant challenges. So let me ask, and this is directed at everybody. The challenge of COVID was quite intense, and artists reacted in different ways. And again, funding was a matter of was one issue. And here we are in Venice, where we connect with one another, and these connections are fantastic for all of us to meet, because it's so rare that we get an opportunity to connect. But what about artists connecting with one another, and the impact of moments such as the pandemic that prevent artists from connecting? How have you found artists reacting to that? And it's a question for Ibrahim, for Moataz, Roger.
I think I'd kind of like to just quickly jump in, because I think those digital residencies were hugely impactful. And actually the projects and the artists who were involved were able to connect far wider than they would have if they were just in sort of Hackney in northeast London. And suddenly they were working on projects with artists in Asia, the Philippines, Taiwan. We're working with Ghanaian artists. We're working with artists in Brazil. There was sort of this incredible exchange started happening that, because they had to think about working differently, kind of unlocked a lot of possibly perceived barriers, because everyone was suddenly working across Zoom and calls. And so this exchange and knowledge and discussion and debate continued. And we're going to continue doing digital residencies, because we see there's a huge value there as part of then coming out and doing a physical residency as well.
So that's amazing that COVID prompted this kind of thinking, and that the result has been that actually we can add this to the programming. And so, I mean, what kind of questions did that have you think about in terms of like planning, logistics, funding? Does that double the scope of work, or is it?
I think it's about. Yeah, I think it came down to rethinking our logistics and actually valuing some of our back-end team in terms of communications and marketing, and actually bringing forward sort of education support and actually mentoring and partnering mentors with artists as part of those residencies. And putting the investment there, So actually we were able to support a much broader community of arts professionals and creatives, from curators, producers, the artists themselves. And actually everyone got a much richer experience. So it's made us think more about a broader team, if you like, in terms of both artists and production and that sort of thing.
Maybe no, a lot of our challenges are pre-existing. They're pre-COVID challenges when it comes to that connection. And that's primarily because yeah, with the certain infrastructure issues, access to, you know, different cities, the cost of travel. It's quite unfortunate in the central part of Africa where I'm from that it's cheaper for me sometimes to travel to Europe and back, or it's the same cost as it would be, say, to Cape Town and back, which is not that far off. So it's a lot of those issues were pre-COVID with regards to just getting people into those spaces, and which is why, back again, there's the funding issues. It's when we do get that funding, it is spent very often on just trying to get people to connect physically. Because I mean, I'm fascinated by the digital residencies. It's just like, wow, I didn't think of that. But it would be, it's great also just sometimes to get that connection of getting people into the same space. So honestly, COVID it just exacerbated something existing, really.
Well, from my side, COVID was a curse and a blessing. I mean, the blessing was it gave time to get things done in some way or another, because I travel a lot, and it's difficult when you start an institution to tell other people what to do, and you know, you have to know what you want to do yourself, and this doesn't happen automatically. It's not necessarily a monodimensional experience. You know, you have to figure out what you want to show, how you want to show it, who you want to involve, how you're going to get it out there, how you're going to finance it. You know, it's basically running a foundation. People have this glory idea about it, but running a foundation is basically like running any other business. It's the same stuff over and over again, same stuff. You know, it's great to have interesting exhibitions. It's good to have catalogs. It's good to have this. It's good to have that. But how do you get it out there? How do you get people involved? How do you keep, as you mentioned a good point. And who's going to take over from me? I don't know. I don't know. It's a problem. That's a problem in a lot of businesses. Somebody starts a business, they get old, they want to retire, or they pass away. Now what happens? Who's going to carry the flag? Not an easy question. It's not easy. In environments in Africa, you know, there's everybody saying the same thing. There's no public money, so don't even think about it. You got to find other alternatives. Do you charge admission? Do you try to go to Scandinavia to try to raise money? Do you put money of your own money into it? What do you do? Because you got to keep it going all the time. There's no point in doing something and then it collapses when you disappear.
But but do we not find that sometimes institutions evolve and adapt, and when it has an impact on the community, you have community members come in and play a role? I mean,
they can play a role. See, there's different roles they can play, though. You know, you can have people learning how to curate shows. You can have people exhibiting. You can have people making talks. You can have all these things, but you know, the problem I hear from everybody is the same problem. You know, it's a business, and everything takes money, time, and effort. So you know, it's one thing having great ideas, but they have to be implemented in a professional way. There's no point having a very interesting show and no catalog, because then it just disappears again. So who's going to pay for that? And how do you get the catalog to people? Do you charge them money, or you give it out free? Because if it's cost money, then they don't buy it. So yeah, they're all the same stuff. It's the same stuff over and over and over again, as far as I can see. And you have to try to run it in a rational way, and try to get people in there, and try to get people interested, get the public, get the media interested. And it's an ongoing a process. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't want to spend too much time talking here, but you know, what do? Do you go down to the level of the mediocrity, because that brings in more people? You have a show of how rock and roll affects art. You'll have thousands of people there. So, but if you have something that's too complicated, then you turn the public off.
Yeah, there's always this effort to create a balance.
It's a balance.
Think of the audience and try to reach a good wide number of people. Moataz, how have you considered programming? How have you faced these challenges and offered things to people in the community? Because Darb 1718 is very popular, and people do repeatedly go back once and again for concerts, exhibitions. So how do you respond to the public, and how do you cater to the people that come to Darb 1718?
Well, it's like somebody's talking to you. It's not working? From the very beginning, we decided to work in, our aim is to work in contemporary art, which again, the same like what you were mentioning, that this was not really accepted in Egypt because most of the people are still into modern art and still living the 60s or whatever. So contemporary art was not really very much something to be digested. I mean, let's say it this way. So slowly, we started to introduce this and to take it out even from Darb. Darb is a specific area in Old Cairo, but we're trying to take it even some in different other places in downtown and so on. And also we try to communicate with the collectors, although that's very little, but trying to convince them that there is this is the future, and this is stop buying, not stop, but yani, at least give part of your investment to the contemporary art. Even the same way you're giving to the painting, the modern paintings from the early century.
To create patronage,
yes,
as you're saying.
Yeah.
To become patrons.
Yeah, exactly. So it was not easy also, but slowly it started to grow up. Yani, in 14 years, and of course there was another trials from others. I'm not saying that I was carrying the flag myself. I mean, there was many others even before me, and we just continuing each other and we're trying to keep on going. So yeah, we now we have a good communication with the people, with the artists. They trust us. We manage them. Like most of the artists, the education in the university in Egypt, they stopped at Picasso. This is like that's it. So bringing artists, international artists, to come to Egypt to show their work and to have workshops and to communicate together, and trying to send artists from Egypt internationally abroad to different festivals, different biennales or occasions, so they can learn and understand more and come back with different ideas. And also to residences, wherever we can. So this was like our main thing, is like, I want you to see more. I want you to go out. I want you. This is what you've been taught here is not the reality. This is not the word. This is not the language that the word are still talking. There's another language that it's more developed and more understandable, and most of the word you can speak it anywhere. Somebody can understand you, but this is something that it took some time for us, and still, of course, I don't want to say that we reach a high level in that, but we are keep trying. And again, the problem was always the how to say, when the تغيير، ناس بتتغير كتير قوي.
Constant change and constant
turnover of the people who work with Darb. Like somebody comes to work with Darb, but then he stayed for a year, and then, well, he got a better chance in the Gulf or in Dubai or whatever, so he will leave definitely, because he's definitely gonna get better money. Why he would stay with me voluntarily or get paid for peanuts? So that was really suffering. Like I had like I don't know how many people worked with Darb, actually, many. And the moment I start to feel that, wow, this guy or this girl is gonna, start to be part of the thing and to give something, that they just get a better chance, so they have to leave.
But in a way, Moataz, that's also led to a lot of people becoming involved in the arts. ironically, getting their start at Darb
But
1718 and then going off and doing other art things.
for
So
good,
in a
good
way,
for
it's
good
had
for
an
good for them,
impact.
of course. I'm happy for them, but
No,
I'm
no, I
sa- but
understand.
I'm saying it's also like it's like you have to start again always from
Absolutely.
the beginning.
Yeah.
And when about the topic you were talking about before, which is the pandemic, I mean, the only we couldn't work in Cairo. Pandemic was only in Cairo and Alexandria, the big cities, but there was nothing exist anywhere else around the country. So we just moved our activities to Dahab, which is a small city in the Red Sea. I moved there myself, and I started to invite artists to come, and we started to do discussions, talks, and musical events even. And everybody, I mean, I never saw anybody there wearing a mask, so it was an easy thing. So and there was multinational art people from all over the world were coming because this was like the safest place mostly. So that's how we managed to do that slowly throughout the 2 years of so-called pandemic.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
you talk so much about the work that you've managed to do for local communities. Do you ever look out and consider, creating connections between local initiatives and initiatives and artists abroad or in other countries in Africa?
Yes, certainly. Yeah, very much. It's very important. I guess for us, one of the most important things was first to establish the institution, at least for it to have a strong local presence. The pandemic period was very essential because it was one of the very few times that I was not traveling anywhere, so I was just home. I think it was a real gift in disguise in a way. And then, unlike the other cities in Ghana, in Tamale, we only had 1 day of lockdown for disinfecting of the city or whatever they said they were doing. But aside that, it gave us the chance to really reflect upon some of the methods or choices that we had been making in like the establishment of this institution within this local community. Two very important things was looking at the idea of the infrastructure in terms of what it represented, either new or old. And secondly, also looking at like the labor going into the infrastructure. The establishment of the third institution, which is the silo, the 1950s buildings that was built by the time of like the post-independence era by these Russian and Polish architects, was very important in terms of bringing it back to life because of the history that it represented in like the Pan-Africanist movement. And we had to work with local members within the community, people who had sat around the building either to smoke or like for other social activities in order to exhume and excavate this building, which had this bunker, to bring it back to life. But in the process of doing that, we realized that there were these relationships that were created between the labor that was going into that versus, let's say, the community that this building was in, and also the general community at large, in the sense that some of the people that we worked with, one very important character is a guy called Ibrahim, and he's our caretaker at the space now, but he was one of the people that led the excavation of this building, which became this new contemporary art institution. But at the same time, he is one who understands the building from a point of resurrection or restitution, and also trying to, because we have contemporary art exhibitions in it, and currently we have a work by Venezuelan artist Ana Alenzo. And in order to be able to establish a connection between, let's say, the work of this contemporary artwork to the local community, you have some of the labor forces, like someone like Ibrahim, who has physically been part of like an exhumation of, let's say, a space that was something that was termed as an impossible site or space, something that was not supposed to exist, that he's contributed actually to bringing it back to life. So we became more interested in the connection between this idea of the labor. After all, in Red Clay, it was also very evident in the case of our caretaker, Assemblyman. His name is Assemblyman, who has been actively involved even in the construction or building of this space over the last 7 years, but also one who is ready to offer tours, particularly when it comes to connecting, let's say, the works of, let's say, contemporary arts, like institutions that we've worked with, like both the current exhibition with an institution like Gallery Verden in Berlin, or the last exhibition that we did with the Aarhus Museum in Aarhus. And we're doing an exhibition which is opening next month, which is in collaboration with AF Lagos and some other institutions in Europe, and subsequently other shows and collaborations that we're doing. So for me, the real question is how do we build institutions that might be built on the foundations of contemporary art or freedoms, but in that we can be able to turn away from that modernist approach where when institutions are constructed in terms of the people that work within the institutions, like the idea of this idea of professionalism, where there are people who understand in a way who are those who understand art or culture the way that it is. But we are more interested in how we can incorporate the crisis, the precarious labor, and everything actually into like the programming or even into the dissemination. Because after all, we realize that when we have school children coming to these spaces and they have people locally that they are familiar with who are speaking, let's say, the local language, who are even sometimes in a way struggling to somehow break down the ideas of the notions of contemporary art and its experiences or modern art or whatever it is, and translating it to this audience, it creates a different sense of interest. And now we've seen how it's changed, like even the culture within the city, whereas local people within like villages and all that would wake up, dress up as if they were going for a funeral or wedding or outdooring or whatever, which is the normal everyday today things. But going to, let's say, a cultural institution to be able to, let's say, see archival objects or things, which probably they would have experienced or had in their local communities and all that, but because there has been this lack of institutionalization of, let's say, these forms, it somehow always kept it to the background. So it's for me, it was like the idea of the labor and the infrastructure. And once this is more established now, it allows for us to be able to have, let's say, clear conversations with other institutions beyond, like, within the continent and also beyond, to be able to, for instance, establish new points of art.
Well, that's a very salient point, Ibrahim. It's, to have larger conversations, you need to create a foundation of the conversation at home first, and then build on that. And I think, Moataz, you've certainly done that in Egypt. We look forward to seeing what's going to come from the residences in Lagos and in Zimbabwe and in South Africa. And before we wrap up, just a prompt for thought. What sort of alliances can we start to build after today between these different foundations and between all of us as practitioners in Africa?
I mean, the first thing is basically just sharing and exchanging ideas, because I can imagine that several of the challenges that are experienced by these other centers are either encountered by us or perhaps will be encountered by us. And there's no need to sort of, in Norwegian you say sort of invent the wheel twice, I think you say it in English as well. So there's no point doing it twice. Why not help each other? And if there are experiences that can be exchanged, that's honestly just the first building block. I'm already just like sitting on the digital residencies, planning them in my mind.
Yeah, I think that is fantastic. And actually, I'd love to come out and see you, Ibrahim, and learn how we can start developing our team on the ground, particularly out on the farm as well, and how the lessons that you've learnt, how we can sort of incorporate that. We have an amazing team of farm workers who are absolute advocates for sustainable farming methods. And if we can replicate that with the artists and with the studios and the workshops we're about to start building there, I think that would be fantastic to learn from that. But also to look and explore about reciprocal projects and how we'd love to sort of welcome artists and practitioners from other parts of Africa. I think it's really important that we have that really good mix of people at any one time in residence. And I think that's going to be quite an art form. And if we can get a creative director appointed soon, I will be very happy. So if you know anyone in your networks who would love to work in Lagos, who is in Lagos, that would be even better. That would be fantastic. But yeah, let's work together and let's look at how we can support each other, and whether that's through sharing knowledge. And I would be happy to jump on a call with anybody at any time.
Thank you. Roger?
Well, I think the points are all excellent. It's a matter of speaking, thinking, visiting, interacting, and perhaps something interesting comes out of the conversation. And I guess the key is always to follow up on it. Things all day are going through your mind, and what's important ultimately is if you find something that you feel positive about, to follow up on it and cement the link in one way or another. So I guess there are a lot of, it was very interesting speaking to everybody here and listening to everybody. And I hope we can keep the doors open and keep communicating. And, as they say in Italy, Rome wasn't built in one day.
Sure. Well, I don't want to keep repeating the same words that everybody's saying, because I think we all have the same intentions, but maybe I can say that, okay, we have at Darb, we are 1,000 square meters closed areas and 2,000 square meters open areas. And we'll be so happy and honored if you can come, bring your artists, use the place, because we need this kind of communication, and we need to have more arts coming from outside to Egypt. And people in Egypt, they want to know more about what's happening in Africa, what's happening around the world. It's the more we have, the more that the better for everybody around. So if you ever have so let's consider Darb is a place for you at any time if you want to come and use it, and it will be a great pleasure for all of us.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Ibrahim?
Oh, thank you. I think everyone has said everything that needs to be said. So all I will say is that thank you very much. We are, just interested in opening up arts and cultural experiences. So we are very much interested in doing this in partnership with everyone. So of course we are open to collaborations and also traveling exhibitions and workshops and all kinds of things. So I guess that we should stay connected and try as much as possible to do the best to help one another. That's it.
Sure.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say something?
Please.
My name is Susie. I work for an auction house called Strauss & Company in Johannesburg. But I would like to say thank you, because all of these institutions are driven with passion and vision from people within the creative economy, and all of us have a factor to play, but often you don't get thanked. And I think that's something that is really important, because it's done with the greatest enthusiasm for building legacy and building an art market across a continent that's very big. And I think the word collaboration is absolutely our motto for this year. And I look forward to maybe welcoming you to Johannesburg or Cape Town or wherever, but I think we also need to come to you, because the continent is big, but we've got to get out of our small places and come and visit the big, wide, wonderful Africa. So thank you. Thank you for all of us.
Thank you for your kind
Pleasure.
words. Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience?
Hi, thank you very much. We just opened a new space in Tunis, which is called Trondebis, and I relate a lot to what has been said, especially with you, Moataz, in Egypt. We're struggling a lot. We have been struggling a lot. Now we're open. We just launched the opening season last January. And indeed, we don't have a public policy for art and culture. We don't have museums. We had the Bardot Museum for antique ceramics, a mosaic, but it's been closed since the coup last July, so we don't have a parliament. And since the museum is connected to the parliament, the museum is also closed. So, yeah, I relate to everything you've been saying. And also, I think it's important to be aware of the fact that our scenes in each country are quite isolated. We are in between Libya and Algeria, and we are not connected at all to the scenes in Libya and Algeria. I came to Egypt a year ago and actually visited the Darb and met Georges. You were in Sinai, I guess. And yeah, it's very important to do this, to take action to connect within the continent, the African continent, and to gather our resources and ideas and spaces. Our space is an association, but it's completely private funds. We are funded by a Tunisian patron, Mesen, an art collector, and I'm also very happy to share ideas with anyone here and to say that we have 4,000 square meters in the very city center of Tunis that has been emptied from almost any cultural or artistic initiatives for a few decades. There are, of course, great things happening with La Rue, for example, Dream City, if you've heard of it. There are like small actions, but everything is very difficult. There are no opportunities for artists, no funding, no. I mean, it's hard. We're struggling, and I'm sure that if we all connect and try to collaborate at the continent scale, we can do amazing things. And I would like to thank also Ibrahim, who accepted a few days ago to participate in a program we are organizing in July. It's a mentorship program for young North African artists from Mauritania to Morocco, and with the African Fund for Culture, who is also doing amazing work on the continent. So if you have around you any young artists from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, and Mauritania, the call is still open. It's a 3-week program with amazing artists, curators, researchers coming to lead this program for 3 weeks. And yeah, that's it. I'm happy also to talk later and to develop any collaboration with your spaces.
Thank you so much. It's really important, isn't it, for these opportunities where we can connect and network with other people and immediately just in a room full of people. I think there's so many potential plans, and maybe in 2 years' time we'll come back and be able to talk about them. Thank you so much to the panelists and to everyone here today. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Oh, we have one more question. A question? Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Maria Melon. I will be talking later about our institution in Kenya in the panel. As I was listening to you, and again, I just want to second everybody how inspirational it is. I was thinking about connections between art-centered, artist-centered residencies and institutions and museums that are both art and artist-centered, but also audiences-centered and development of audiences. Many of your institutions have connections or are originated in countries with great museums. Do you have relations with these museums? How do these museums help you? You know, we heard about the government's flattering and less flattering things, but what about museums? And how would you think museums on the continent, as they develop, can think about relationship with residencies, artists, and this kind of things? Thank you.
You mean do you mean museums in my country, or you mean international museums?
Well, whichever you want to talk about, of course. You know, Egypt now opened a number of great museums. So yeah, whichever experience is closer to you. So it's aspirational. If should there be good museums, art museums in your country, what you would want this relations to be like, or if you had experience with any kind of museums, do tell. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
Concerning museums in Egypt, well,
I think the unfortunate thing about museums in Egypt is that as much as we would like as practitioners and as institutions
Yeah.
in Egypt to collaborate with the museums. Because they are government run, they are run with, intentions and orders from people working in the Ministry of Culture. And it's a
Absolutely,
very, very hard challenge to work with them. There's a lot of fractures in the art world in Egypt, unfortunately, and as much as we try to mend it, it's not very easy to mend or to be able to collaborate. And I think that Moataz and many people have tried to make the effort of reaching out, but it's a problem, the solution is beyond our reach. And so unfortunately, as wonderful as the museums are in Egypt and as wonderful as the objects and paintings are, and what could be done, speaking as a curator, what could have been done really is just the endless ideas. But unfortunately, we don't have that privilege and that ability to be in dialogue with the artwork and the museums as a whole in Egypt.
That's true. Perfectly said. Thank you. But there is something, but I'm not going to mention the name of the museum because it's still on progress. But hopefully something going to happen in December with a big museum, international museum big museum outside of Egypt, that they will come and we're going to have like a huge events. But we'll see, because also to get permissions and to have artists, international artists coming to Egypt like these days, it's not an easy thing, but we will try to do that. So let's cross our fingers and hope.
So we are exploring with a number of major museums and cultural centres in the Northern Hemisphere about developing reciprocal residencies for curators, for art handlers, for archivists, to really start to support that cultural infrastructure from the ground up. And I think that's a major part of our mission and Yinka's vision, that we look to how do we sort of get this sort of professional development at home, in country, the experiences, and really invest in supporting the growing cultural infrastructure in certainly in West Africa and Nigeria. So that's something we're actively in discussion with at the moment, is sort of a program of exchange between so for example, one of the projects is working with young curators from an area in London, which is the largest diaspora area, African diaspora area in London. Young curators from there in exchange with this major institution, and with young curators from Lagos and wider Nigeria. And that will be a year-long program. They will both spend time in each other's country. They will all have mentoring as part of what they're doing, and there'll be an online course that we're talking to another provider to support. And the idea is that will become a model that we can take to other organizations, other residencies can then do it. It's really about, okay, let's create a model, let's create the brokerage, let's look at what's all the infrastructure you need behind that, and then let's share it, and let's make it happen all over. So it is important, it's not just curators, it's everything else behind that as well.
Beautiful.
There aren't many museums of sort of the traditional sense in Zambia, and one of the two slightly larger ones is from the colonial era. So it's in praise of David Livingstone, who apparently discovered the greatest waterfalls. But so it's very, despite the people being there for a while. But anyway, so that is, it's commemorated. It's from a particular time, and then the other museum that was put up in the capital city. Back again to the whole thing of lack of funding, etc., and being under the Ministry of Tourism. So it does limit how we can collaborate, especially as our institution is not intended to be a repository for artifacts. So any connections we have with the local museums are on a person-to-person basis because we know them through visual arts councils and personal experiences. But a private ambition is when we are able to lobby in the future for acquisition budgets from maybe the state, that whatever may be created in these artist spaces, because we don't have the space and we don't have conservators who can work full-time. I work at a large modern art museum in Norway. I understand we don't have the capacity to do that within the next 10 to 20 years kind of thing. But if we can lobby to get acquisition budgets so that our national museum can then acquire the works that are created by the people that come through our spaces, that would be a sort of private ambition for us and something we would look towards in the future, because no active acquisition has been happening for many years in the post-independence era after, I think Ibrahim talked a little bit about like the neglect of the initial institutions that were set up post-independence in 1964. So that's our relationship with the current museums, and it doesn't seem to be any other museums that will be opening in Zambia anytime soon that I know of. So we'll work with what we've got.
I think on that note, thank you so much again to everyone, and thank you for your attendance today.